The clock struck midnight, and Dave was wide awake in his cozy apartment. He'd been tossing and turning for hours, but sleep seemed to be playing a cruel game of hide and seek. The night was unusually quiet, not a sound from the bustling city outside. Dave let out a frustrated sigh and rolled over, staring at the dark ceiling. Then he heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a breeze, tickling the edges of his consciousness. He sat up in bed, straining to catch the sound. There it was again, a soft, almost teasing murmur, like someone was sharing a secret with the dark. Dave's heart raced, but he shook it off as just his imagination. "Great, now I'm hearing things," he muttered, trying to convince himself that he was just overtired. But then the whispers grew louder, clearer. They sounded like voices in conversation, muffled yet unmistakable. Dave's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to investigate. He tiptoed out of bed and crept down the hallway, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The whispers seemed to follow him, growing louder with each step. Dave felt like he was in some sort of weird, eerie version of a scavenger hunt. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. The only response was the soft, persistent whispering. He turned on the lights, hoping that would somehow silence the voices. No such luck. The whispers didn't stop. In fact, they seemed to be getting more animated, like an argument was brewing. Dave decided to check the living room, where the whispers seemed to be coming from. As he reached the doorway, he froze. There, sitting in his favorite armchair, was a small, scruffy-looking dog, a dog that he didn't recognize at all. It was staring straight at him with the most serious expression, as if it was deeply invested in a heated debate. "Well, this is just great," Dave said aloud, more to himself than the dog. "Now I'm hallucinating dogs in my own apartment." The dog continued to stare, and the whispers turned into a high-pitched, almost comical argument. Dave couldn't help but chuckle. It was as if the dog was involved in an intense debate about whether Dave should have gone for a walk earlier in the day. The whispers reached a crescendo, and the dog suddenly leaped out of the chair, barking and wagging its tail. Dave was startled, but then he noticed the small piece of paper stuck to the bottom of the chair. He picked it up, and on it was a note that read, "Find the source, and you'll find your answer." "Seriously?" Dave muttered, looking at the dog, which now seemed to be waiting expectantly. "Is this some kind of prank?" The dog's eyes seemed to say, "You're not off the hook yet." Dave sighed and started looking around, checking every corner of the room. Finally, he spotted a tiny speaker hidden behind the curtains. It had been playing the whispers on a loop, just loud enough to be eerie, but not so loud that it could easily be traced. Dave burst out laughing, a mix of relief and amusement washing over him. "Well, that explains the ghostly voices," he said to the dog, who was now sitting calmly, its tail wagging in what looked like approval. As Dave unplugged the speaker and turned it off, the whispers faded into silence. The dog gave him a satisfied look, as if it had completed its mission. Dave shook his head, smiling. "So, it wasn't a ghost, just a prank," he said aloud, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Guess I can finally get some sleep." The dog yawned and stretched, then padded over to a cozy spot on the rug. Dave turned off the lights and headed back to bed, feeling both relieved and amused. As he finally settled in, he glanced at the clock. It was almost 1 in the morning. "Good night, Mystery Mutt," he said with a grin. "Thanks for the scare, I guess." Dave drifted off to sleep, the earlier tension replaced by the comfort of a funny, if slightly unsettling adventure. And as for the dog, well, it had a contented look on its face, as if it had enjoyed its little trick just as much as Dave enjoyed unraveling it. So next time you hear whispers in the night, remember, it might just be a mischievous dog playing its own version of hide and seek. It was a peaceful evening, and Mark was enjoying the quiet. He had the place to himself for the first time in weeks. No roommates barging in, no loud neighbors. Just him, a bowl of popcorn, and his favorite movie queued up on the TV. Life was good. As the opening credits rolled, Mark got comfortable on the couch, draping a blanket over his legs. But just as the music from the movie began to pick up, something flickered in the corner of his eye. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was just a trick of the light. But there it was again, a shadow moving just outside the window. Mark paused the movie and glanced over. Nothing. It was dark outside, just the usual shapes. The tree by the yard, a few cars parked across the street, and the lamppost casting a soft glow. He shrugged, hit play, and went back to his movie. Probably just the wind. But 5 minutes later, there it was again. This time, the shadow lingered. It wasn't just a quick flicker. No, this one seemed solid, like someone was standing outside, staring in. Mark squinted, trying to make out the shape. It looked like a person, tall, still, just out of the light's reach. Mark laughed. Probably just one of the neighbors being weird again. He muttered to himself, shaking his head. He lived in a neighborhood full of quirky characters. There was Old Man Jenkins, who mowed his lawn at midnight, and the teenage kid next door who was always practicing some kind of bizarre dance moves on the sidewalk. Yeah, maybe it was one of them, but still, it was a little creepy. He stood up, deciding to close the curtains. Better safe than sorry, right? But as he approached the window, the shadow moved. It didn't disappear or run away. No, it moved toward him, closer and closer, until it was right up against the glass. Mark froze. This wasn't some neighbor playing a prank. The figure wasn't just standing there anymore. It was pressed against the window, as if trying to peer inside. And that's when he noticed. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, no features at all. Just a blank, dark outline of a person. His heart raced. What the? He stepped back, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The figure just stood there, still and silent, its head tilted slightly, as if it was watching him. Mark tried to laugh it off. Okay, this is fine. No big deal. Just some random faceless thing at my window. Happens all the time, right? But his voice cracked, betraying his nerves. He reached for his phone, quickly dialing his best friend, Tim. Tim would know what to do. Tim was the rational one. Mark wasn't sure what to say. How do you even start that conversation? Hey, Tim, so there's a faceless shadow person staring at me through my window. Any advice? The phone rang and rang and rang. No answer. Great, Tim. Just great, Mark muttered, pacing the room. He looked back at the window. The figure hadn't moved, still pressed against the glass, like it was waiting for something. What do you want? Mark shouted, half hoping it would just vanish like in the movies. But no, the shadow remained. If anything, it seemed more focused now, like it could hear him. Then, a brilliant idea struck him. Of course, he whispered. Mark marched over to the window and with a flourish, yanked the curtains shut. Problem solved. Out of sight, out of mind, right? He chuckled nervously and flopped back onto the couch, grabbing the remote. But just as he hit play again, there was a knock. A light tap, tap, tap against the glass. Mark's stomach dropped. Nope, 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 he muttered, burying himself deeper into the couch cushions. Maybe if he ignored it, it would go away. Tap, tap, tap. Mark clenched his teeth. Don't look, Mark. Whatever you do, don't look. But of course, curiosity got the best of him. Slowly, ever so slowly, he peeked over the edge of the couch. The curtains, which he had just pulled shut, were now slightly open. Just enough for the figure to be peeking through. Oh, come on, Mark groaned. Really? You're just gonna stand there? He grabbed a pillow and threw it in the figure's general direction, as if that would help. It didn't. Tap, tap, tap. Mark's mind raced. Okay, think, Mark, think. What do people do in horror movies? They run, or they call the cops. He reached for his phone again, but the battery was dead. Of course it is. He stood up, moving toward the front door. Maybe if he just left the house, the creepy shadow would get bored and go haunt someone else. But just as he reached for the doorknob, something caught his eye. The figure. It wasn't outside the window anymore. Number It was inside. Mark spun around, heart pounding in his chest. There, standing in the middle of the room, was the faceless figure. No sound, no movement, just standing, watching. If it could watch without eyes, that is. Mark did what any reasonable person would do in this situation. He screamed, loudly, "Tim, where are you when I need you, man?" And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure turned and walked away, right through the wall, as if it was never there to begin with. Mark blinked. Wait, did that just happen? Did I imagine that? He looked around, half expecting the figure to pop up again. But no, the room was empty. Quiet. Too quiet. He collapsed onto the couch, staring at the window, which was now completely closed. His heart finally began to slow down. Maybe it was just his imagination. Maybe he was more tired than he thought. But then, tap, tap, tap. Mark threw the blanket over his head. Nope, not dealing with this tonight. It started with a simple creak. Just a faint sound, barely noticeable at first. Rachel, a young graphic designer living alone in an old apartment building, dismissed it as the building settling. But as nights passed, the creaking grew louder, more insistent, echoing through her small studio apartment. One chilly October evening, after a long day of deadlines and pixel-perfect designs, Rachel returned home exhausted, looking forward to a quiet night. She settled on her couch with a warm cup of tea, scrolling mindlessly through her social media feeds. That's when she heard it again, the unmistakable creaking of her bedroom door. She frowned, setting her tea aside and peering down the short hallway. The door stood slightly ajar, casting a sliver of darkness into the otherwise well-lit living room. Strange, she muttered, certain she had closed it before leaving that morning. She chalked it up to forgetfulness, got up, and firmly shut the door, making sure it clicked closed. Back on the couch, Rachel resumed her scrolling, trying to push the odd occurrence out of her mind. But just as she began to relax, there it was, the creak again, like a finger tracing along the edge of her patience. This time she froze, staring at the hallway. The door was open again, wider this time, inviting. A chill ran down her spine. "Okay, enough," she said aloud, more to reassure herself than anything else. She marched over, shut the door with a bit more force than necessary, and even wedged a chair under the knob for good measure. Satisfied, she returned to her couch, determined to ignore any further disturbances. Minutes turned into hours as she lost herself in a new series on her laptop. Midnight came and went, and just as Rachel began to nod off, a sound jolted her awake, a loud crash from the direction of the hallway. Heart racing, she jumped up, eyes wide, and rushed toward the noise. The chair lay on its side, the door wide open again. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. This couldn't be happening. There was no logical explanation. She hesitated, then cautiously peeked into her bedroom, half expecting to find an intruder or a prankster. But the room was empty, the window closed, everything exactly as she left it. Fear mingled with frustration as she slammed the door shut once more, her mind racing with questions. What force could keep opening this door? Was it faulty hinges, a draft, or something more sinister, lurking just beyond her understanding? Determined to solve the mystery, Rachel stayed awake, eyes fixed on the bedroom door, refusing to let it out of her sight. Hours passed, the silence stretching like an eerie veil over her apartment. Just as she began to think she might have imagined it all, she heard a faint scratching noise, a sound like claws on wood. Her heart skipped a beat as the door handle rattled softly. She held her breath, watching in disbelief as the handle turned, slowly, as if guided by an unseen hand. With a sudden burst of courage, Rachel lunged forward, gripping the handle firmly and pulling the door open with all her strength. Nothing. No one. Just an empty hallway, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights filtering through the window blinds. Rachel stood there, breathing heavily, her mind racing. She knew then that this wasn't just a door. It was a portal to something she couldn't comprehend. With a mix of fear and determination, Rachel decided to leave her apartment that night, seeking refuge with a friend until she could figure out what to do next. As she closed the door behind her, she felt a strange sense of relief and closure, knowing she had escaped whatever unseen force had plagued her. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that the door, that stubborn, unsettling door, still held secrets untold, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to open it. And so, dear listeners, remember this tale when you find yourself facing a door that won't stay closed. Is it just a faulty latch, or could it be something more mysterious? Perhaps you have a similar story to share. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more eerie tales to keep you awake, or help you sleep if you dare. You know that feeling when you're about to fall asleep and everything is peaceful? That moment when you're all snuggled up, ready to drift off? Well, that's where Ethan was. It had been a long day at work, and all he wanted was his bed. The sheets were cool, the lights were off, and the house was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the only one left in the world. Then, it started. The footsteps. At first, he thought it was the wind, because who wants to believe something creepy is happening in their house, right? But no, this wasn't the wind. This was the sound of someone walking. Slow, heavy steps coming down the hallway. Ethan sat up, eyes wide open, heart suddenly doing this weird, panicky dance in his chest. He stared at the door, waiting for it to swing open. But nothing. Just the sound of those footsteps, closer and closer. Now here's the thing. Ethan lived alone, and as far as he knew, his house wasn't haunted. Sure, the pipes made a noise now and then, and yeah, the floorboards creaked. But this was different. And you know what the worst part was? It stopped. The footsteps stopped just outside his bedroom door. And of course, the first thing that ran through Ethan's mind was, great, I'm about to be murdered by a ghost in pajamas. So, what does he do? Does he leap out of bed and bravely confront whoever, or whatever, is on the other side of that door? Nope. Ethan stays right where he is, because let's be honest, no one in their right mind gets up to investigate weird noises in the middle of the night. That's how horror movies start, right? But then, the doorknob jiggles. Not a lot, just a little twitch, like someone, or something, was testing it. That's when Ethan remembered he'd locked the door before going to bed. Small victories, right? Except now, he was faced with an even worse situation. Why is something trying to get in? You can imagine the thoughts racing through his head. Is this a ghost? A burglar? The world's worst house guest? And seriously, why wasn't this thing saying anything? Ethan could deal with a thief, maybe even a ghost, but silence. That was a whole different level of creepy. For a moment, everything went quiet again. Ethan thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. He was about to breathe a sigh of relief when the footsteps started again. But this time, they were walking away, slowly, down the hallway, like whoever, or whatever it was, had given up. Now, you'd think that would be a good thing, right? But nope. This was somehow worse, because now Ethan was lying there, wondering where it went, what it was, and more importantly, if it would come back. At this point, He's staring at the ceiling, wide awake, thinking to himself, maybe I should just move. New house, new city, new identity. Problem solved. But as luck would have it, Ethan had a brilliant idea. Sarcasm intended. He decided to text his friend Mike. Mike, who never took anything seriously, and who, in true best friend fashion, replied with, "Dude, it's probably just your cat." Oh right, the cat. Why didn't I think of that? Except, there was one tiny flaw in Mike's genius deduction. Ethan didn't have a cat. He texted back, "Nice try, Sherlock. I live alone, remember?" And Mike, bless his oblivious soul, just texted back a bunch of laughing emojis. Helpful. Now, at this point, Ethan was seriously debating whether to get up and check the hallway or just pretend none of this ever happened. But, in a rare moment of bravery, or sleep-deprived stupidity, he threw off the covers, grabbed the nearest weapon, which happened to be a shoe, and tiptoed toward the door. Slowly, very slowly, he unlocked the door. The hallway was empty. No mysterious figure, no intruder, no ghost. Just the same old creaky floorboards and dim lighting that looked way creepier at night than it did during the day. Feeling a little braver now that the hallway wasn't filled with spooky footsteps, Ethan stepped out. Nothing. Not a single thing out of place. He even checked the front door, just to be sure. Locked, secure, no sign of forced entry. He scratched his head, feeling a little foolish. Maybe Mike was right, and it was just something dumb. Maybe the footsteps were his brain playing tricks on him after a long day. But just as he was about to head back to bed, something caught his eye. There, in the far corner of the hallway, was a small, muddy footprint, child-sized. Ethan froze. His breath caught in his throat. He didn't have kids. So, where had the footprint come from? Slowly backing away, he returned to his bedroom, heart racing again. This time, he didn't bother locking the door. He just got back under the covers, stared at the ceiling, and muttered, "Nope. We're not doing this tonight. Not tonight." The next morning, he woke up to a bright, sunny day. The footprint was gone. The hallway was as normal as ever, and for a brief moment, Ethan convinced himself that it had all been a weird, unsettling dream. Until, as he stepped into the kitchen to make coffee, he heard it again. The footsteps. It all started on a Tuesday morning. Nothing unusual, just the typical chaos of my dorm room. My roommate, Kevin, was sprawled across his bed, mouth open, snoring like a chainsaw. I had a full day of classes ahead, but Kevin, he had somehow managed to avoid signing up for anything before noon. Classic Kevin. So I left him there, dreaming of pizza, or whatever it is he dreams about. By the time I got back that afternoon, things were off. The first thing I noticed, his bed, completely made. Now, if you've ever lived with Kevin, you'd know this was red flag number one. The guy had a lifelong vendetta against bedsheets. He treated making the bed like it was an ancient curse, so seeing it pristine. Weird. But you know, miracles happen. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe he was trying out this thing called cleaning up after yourself, a rare concept in our dorm. But then, as I tossed my backpack down, something else caught my eye. His side of the room was empty, like completely bare. No clothes on the floor, no half-eaten bags of chips, no dirty sneakers. It was like Kevin had vanished, or become an overnight minimalist. At first I laughed. Kevin? A neat freak? Yeah, right. I even thought it might be a prank. I mean, this is the guy who once filled my backpack with pudding cups as a funny surprise. But as I checked his desk and opened drawers, there was nothing. It wasn't just neat, it was empty. His laptop, his textbooks, his favorite hoodie, gone. I shot him a text, figuring he'd explain the joke soon enough. Something like, "Surprise. I moved to Fiji," but there was no reply. Hours passed, and still nothing. That's when I started to get this weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. You know, the kind that whispers, something is really, really wrong. It was when I knocked on our neighbor's door that things got really strange. "Hey, have you seen Kevin?" I asked my buddy Mike. He gave me this blank stare, like I'd asked him if the moon was made of cheese. "Who?" he replied. "Kevin, my roommate." Mike looked at me like I'd just made up a new word. "Dude, you don't have a roommate. You've always had this place to yourself." I laughed at first, thinking he was messing with me. "Good one, Mike. Real funny. Now seriously, have you seen him?" But Mike didn't laugh. He just shook his head and closed the door, leaving me standing there with this growing knot of confusion. What was happening? I went back to my room, sat on the edge of my bed, and tried to piece things together. Kevin had definitely existed. We'd lived together for months. I had memories, too many of them, of his dirty socks, his ramen obsession, his endless stories about his epic gaming conquests. But now, it was like he'd never been here. His toothbrush wasn't in the bathroom. His posters were gone from the walls. Even the dent in the couch where he used to sit and play video games for hours had vanished. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos. There had to be something. A selfie we'd taken at that party. A picture of him covered in chips after losing a bet. Anything. But no. Every photo that should have had Kevin in it, he was missing. I started doubting myself. Had I imagined him? Was Kevin just a figment of my sleep-deprived brain? But that didn't make sense. He was real. He had to be. I mean, how else could I explain the pudding cups in my bag? Desperate for answers, I decided to do the only logical thing. I called my mom. Because if anyone could remember Kevin, it was her. After all, she'd met him during move-in day. "Hey Mom," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "Do you remember my roommate, Kevin?" There was a pause, and then she replied, "Sweetie, you don't have a roommate. You told me you were living alone this semester." I hung up the phone, my mind spinning. How could this be? Kevin was real. He had to be, right? That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Had I been living with a ghost, an invisible prankster? Or had my life just taken a bizarre twist into some kind of alternate reality where Kevin had never existed? Just as I was about to fall asleep, my phone buzzed. A text message from Kevin. "Hey, sorry I disappeared. Got into some weird stuff. Don't worry about me. Oh, and stop eating my leftover pizza." I stared at the message for a full minute, heart pounding. Was this a joke? A glitch in the universe? Before I could reply, the message deleted itself. Gone. Just like Kevin. And just like that, I was left alone in the dorm, wondering if I'd ever really had a roommate in the first place. But one thing was for sure. I was definitely keeping the pizza. So, what do you think? Was Kevin ever real? Or did I just dream up the perfect excuse to eat his pizza? Let me know in the comments. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. You never know when someone might disappear or reappear. You know those nights when you feel like you're being watched? Not just by the shadows on the wall, but by something unseen, something you can't quite explain. It was one of those nights when I first felt the presence lingering in the darkness of my room. Picture this: a typical bedroom, quiet and dimly lit by the soft glow of a bedside lamp. I had just settled into bed, pulling the covers snugly around me, ready to drift off into a peaceful slumber. But as I closed my eyes, a strange sensation washed over me, a feeling that I wasn't alone. At first, I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the wind rustling through the trees outside, or the house settling with its usual creaks and groans. But then I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like a soft whisper echoing in the room. My heart quickened. I strained to listen, but the whisper was elusive, dancing on the edge of my consciousness. Was it real, or just a figment of my tired mind? I couldn't be sure. Yet there was no denying the chill that crawled up my spine, urging me to open my eyes and confront whatever lurked in the darkness. With a hesitant breath, I glanced around the room. Shadows flickered on the walls, playing tricks with my perception. And that's when I saw it. A subtle movement near the foot of my bed, where the darkness seemed to gather into a shape, like a silhouette forming out of nothingness. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the low light, but as my eyes adjusted, the silhouette became clearer. It wasn't just a shadow, it was a presence, a palpable entity watching me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice barely louder than a breath. But there was no answer, just a lingering silence that filled the room like a heavy fog. I waited, unsure of what to expect next, but the presence remained, unmoving, yet ever present. As minutes stretched into eternity, my mind raced with questions. Who, or what, was this visitor in my room? Why had it chosen tonight of all nights to reveal itself? And most importantly, was I in danger? Just as I mustered the courage to reach for the bedside lamp, the room plunged into darkness. The bulb flickered once, twice, then went out completely, leaving me enveloped in an unsettling silence. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, fingers trembling as I struggled to find the flashlight app. With a click, the screen illuminated the room in a cold blue glow, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. And there it was again, a movement in the corner, where the darkness seemed to pool like ink, spilled across the floor. The presence had shifted, closer now, its form indistinct, yet undeniably real. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice wavering with a mix of fear and curiosity. This time, there was a response, not in words, but in a subtle shift of the air, a feeling that the visitor acknowledged my question. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything to happen. But the visitor remained silent, a silent sentinel in the corner of my room. With each passing moment, my fear ebbed slightly, replaced by a strange sense of acceptance. Maybe the visitor meant no harm, I reasoned. Perhaps it was simply passing through, drawn by some unknown force or curiosity. Whatever the reason, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was witnessing something beyond my comprehension, something that blurred the line between reality and imagination. As the night wore on, the visitor eventually faded back into the shadows, leaving me alone once more. I stayed awake, thoughts racing as I tried to make sense of what had transpired. Was it a dream? A trick of the mind? Or had I truly encountered something otherworldly that night? To this day, I can't say for certain. But one thing is clear. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, lingering in the shadows of our memories, waiting to be revisited in the quiet hours of the night. And so, dear listener, as you drift off into your own dreams tonight, remember this tale of the night visitor, a reminder that sometimes the things we cannot see are the most real of all. Sleep well, if you can. Ever had that feeling when you're drifting off to sleep and suddenly something grabs your foot? Not in a friendly way, mind you, but in a chilling, who's there kind of way. Well, let me tell you about a friend of mine, let's call him Mike, who had an encounter with just that, a phantom hand. Mike was your typical night owl, scrolling through his phone long after midnight. His apartment was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Just as he was about to call it a night and finally get some shut-eye, he felt it, a cold, clammy hand wrapping around his ankle. Now, Mike wasn't the type to panic easily. He figured it was just his mind playing tricks on him, maybe a weird sensation from sitting too long. So, he shook his foot, brushed it off, and tried to ignore the goosebumps crawling up his arms. But then, it happened again. This time, The grip was firmer, almost like someone was trying to pull him under the bed. He sat up, heart pounding, scanning the room. Nothing. Just the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the curtains. Now, Mike was no stranger to horror movies. He knew the golden rule: never investigate strange noises or phantom hands. But curiosity got the best of him. With a mix of bravery and stupidity, he leaned over the edge of the bed, peering into the darkness. Still, nothing. Just an eerie silence that made the hair on his neck stand on end. He chuckled nervously, blaming it on a lack of sleep and too much caffeine. But just as he settled back down, there it was again, a faint, icy touch on his foot. This time, Mike wasn't taking any chances. He yanked his foot away, throwing the covers over himself like a shield. He stared at the ceiling, heart racing, mind racing even faster. Who, or what, was haunting his bedroom? Minutes felt like hours as he lay there, listening intently for any sign of movement. The apartment remained still, save for the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Just as he began to relax, thinking maybe it was all in his head, he heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping on the bedroom window. Now, Mike wasn't about to go investigate some tapping at his window in the middle of the night. He'd seen enough horror movies to know that never ends well. Instead, he pulled the covers tighter, closed his eyes, and tried to convince himself it was just a branch brushing against the glass. But the tapping grew louder, more insistent, almost as if whatever was outside wanted to come in. Mike's heart raced again, this time with a mix of fear and frustration. "What do you want?" he blurted out, half expecting an answer. Silence. The tapping stopped abruptly, leaving Mike with a sinking feeling in his stomach. Had he just invited whatever, or whoever, was out there to come inside? He held his breath, waiting for a response that never came. Hours passed, or at least it felt that way to Mike. Eventually, exhaustion won over fear, and he drifted off to sleep, the events of the night still lingering in his mind, like a bad dream. The next morning, Mike woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains. He rubbed his eyes, half expecting to find himself still trapped in a nightmare. But everything seemed normal. The room was empty, the window closed, and no sign of any phantom hands. As he got out of bed, he noticed something strange, a faint imprint on the sheets where his foot had been grabbed. It looked like the outline of a hand, fingers slightly curled as if reaching out for him. Mike shuddered, but then he chuckled to himself. "Guess I won't be staying up so late anymore," he muttered, shaking his head at the absurdity of it all. And that, my friends, is the tale of Mike and the Phantom Hand, a reminder that sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't see. So, next time you feel a chill in the air or a strange sensation at your feet, remember Mike's story. And maybe, just maybe, keep a flashlight handy under your bed. You know those nights when you feel like something's watching you? Not just the usual creepy crawly feeling, but a real, intense sensation that someone, or something, is in the room with you. Well, that's exactly how it started for me. It was a typical evening, nothing out of the ordinary. I had just finished binge-watching a series, the kind that keeps you up way past bedtime, and I finally decided to call it a night. I turned off the TV, brushed my teeth, and slipped into bed, ready to drift off into dreamland. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I felt it. A presence, subtle yet unmistakable, lingering in the corner of my room. Now let me tell you, I'm not one to believe in ghosts or anything supernatural. I'm more of a skeptic, really. But this was different. I tried to shake off the feeling, blaming it on the eerie silence of the night. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, I thought. So I rolled over, buried my head under the pillow, and tried to ignore it. But every time I opened my eyes, there it was, a shadowy figure, standing perfectly still in the corner, not moving an inch, just watching. It wasn't menacing or threatening, just there. I mustered up the courage to sit up and squint at the figure. Maybe it was a trick of the streetlight filtering through the curtains, or perhaps my tired eyes were playing games with me. But no, this figure had a distinct shape, like a person who shouldn't be there. I blinked hard, hoping it would disappear like a mirage. Yet every time I closed my eyes and opened them again, it remained, as solid as the night itself. At this point, I couldn't ignore it any longer. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I shouted, "Who are you? What do you want?" Silence. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there, unmoving and mysterious. Now, I'm not proud of what I did next, but in my panic, I grabbed the nearest thing, a pillow, and threw it at the figure. Of course, it passed right through, hitting the wall with a soft thud. That's when it hit me. This wasn't some intruder or a figment of my imagination. This was something else entirely, something that defied logic and reason. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the figure, trying to make sense of it all. Was it a ghost, a shadow person, or just my overactive imagination running wild in the dead of night? Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I must have drifted off to sleep, because when I woke up, the figure was gone, vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an empty corner and a lingering sense of unease. To this day, I still wonder who, or what, that figure was. Was it a visitor from another realm, a lost soul seeking solace, or simply a trick of the mind? So, the next time you find yourself awake in the middle of the night, take a look around. You never know what, or who, might be lurking in the shadows, watching silently from the corner of your room. And remember, sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones that move, but the ones that stay perfectly still. You know that feeling when you're just about to drift off to sleep, and suddenly, you hear something? Not the usual nighttime sounds of creaking floors or distant traffic, but a faint, almost rhythmic hum. It's subtle at first, like a distant melody teasing your ears. You try to ignore it, thinking it's just your mind playing tricks on you. But as you lay there in the darkness, it gets louder, closer, until it's echoing inside your head. Picture this. It's a quiet night, and you're tucked snugly in bed, ready to embrace the sweet embrace of sleep. Everything seems peaceful, until there it is again, that mysterious hum. It's not coming from outside, nor is it from any electronics. It's like it's coming from within the walls themselves. You toss and turn, trying to shake off the eerie sensation crawling up your spine. You tell yourself it's probably just the pipes, or maybe a faulty heater. But deep down, you can't shake the feeling that there's something more to this incessant humming. As the night wears on, the hum takes on a life of its own. It's no longer just a noise, it's a presence. It follows you from room to room, growing louder with each step you take. You start to wonder if you're going crazy, or if there's some unseen force at play here. Imagine lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to drown out the sound with thoughts of fluffy kittens and sunny beaches. But no matter how hard you try, the hum persists, wrapping around you like a blanket of uncertainty. Now here's where it gets really strange. You decide to investigate, because let's face it, who wouldn't? Armed with nothing but your bravery and a trusty flashlight, you venture into the heart of the humming. You follow its trail through the dark corridors of your home, your heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. Just when you think you've pinpointed the source, the hum shifts, as if taunting your efforts. It leads you down twisting hallways and into forgotten corners of your house, places you haven't explored in years. The air grows colder, the shadows deeper, and still, the hum beckons you onward. At this point, you're not sure if you're chasing the hum or if it's leading you into a trap. But something compels you to keep going, to unravel the mystery once and for all. Because let's be honest, who can resist a good old-fashioned spooky adventure, right? Finally, you reach the heart of the mystery, a room tucked away at the far end of the house. The hum crescendos to a deafening roar, filling the air with its unearthly melody. You brace yourself, expecting the worst, but what you find is nothing. The room is empty, save for a dusty old record player sitting in the corner. You approach cautiously, half expecting it to come to life and start spinning on its own. But as you inspect it, you realize the truth. The record player is broken, stuck in a loop, endlessly spinning the same tune over and over again. It's not a ghost or a malevolent spirit. It's just a piece of old technology, forgotten and left to haunt the halls of your home. Relief washes over you as you realize there's a logical explanation for the mysterious hum. Maybe it's not so scary after all, just a reminder that even in the silence of night, there's always a rational explanation waiting to be discovered. So, the next time you hear a strange noise in the dark, don't jump to conclusions. Take a deep breath, grab your flashlight, and embark on your own adventure of discovery. Who knows what secrets you'll uncover along the way? And remember, sleep tight, if you can. You know those moments when you're sure you've forgotten something important, but you just can't quite put your finger on it? Well, imagine feeling that way every day, except it's not your keys or your phone you've misplaced. It's a name that keeps slipping through your memory like water through your fingers. It started innocently enough. I'd be at work, chatting with colleagues, and suddenly someone's name would elude me. At first, I blamed it on stress or lack of sleep. But then it started happening more frequently, like my brain had a leak, and names were the first to go. One day, I noticed something strange scratched into the wooden frame of my desk. It was a name, clearly etched, as if by a sharp tool. The letters were jagged and uneven, like they were carved in a hurry. The name was unfamiliar, yet it sparked a strange sense of recognition, like I should know who it belonged to. I brushed it off as a prank, maybe one of my co-workers trying to mess with me. But then, I started seeing the same name everywhere, on street signs, in books, even whispered in passing conversations. It was as if the universe was playing a cosmic joke on me, taunting me with a name I couldn't remember. Things took a turn for the eerie when I began having dreams about the name. In one dream, I found myself in a dimly lit room, facing a mirror. As I stared at my reflection, the name echoed in my mind like a distant echo. I tried to speak it aloud, but my voice caught in my throat, leaving me with a sense of frustration and unease. One night, unable to shake the feeling of impending discovery, I decided to search the name online. To my surprise, there was no record of anyone with that name, no social media profiles, no historical figures, nothing. It was as if the name existed only in my mind and nowhere else. As days turned into weeks, I became obsessed with unraveling the mystery of this forgotten name. I retraced my steps, revisited places where I had seen it, hoping for a clue that would bring clarity. But each attempt only deepened the mystery, leaving me more perplexed than before. Just when I thought I was at the end of my rope, a peculiar thing happened. I received an old photo album from my grandmother, filled with yellowed pictures from her youth. As I flipped through the pages, I stumbled upon a familiar face, a smiling young woman with a mischievous sparkle in her eyes. And beneath the photograph, written in elegant script, was the name I had been searching for all along. It was her name, a name I had heard whispered in dreams and glimpsed in fleeting moments of forgetfulness. Seeing it there, in black and white, brought a wave of relief and understanding. It turned out the name belonged to my grandmother's best friend, someone she had often spoken about, but whose memory had faded with time. Finding her name was like uncovering a lost treasure, a piece of my family history that had been waiting patiently to be rediscovered. So, the next time you find yourself struggling to remember something important, whether it's a name or a forgotten memory, remember that sometimes the answers are closer than you think. Perhaps they're etched into the fabric of your past, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves and bring clarity to your journey. And with that, I invite you to share your own experiences. Have you ever felt like you've forgotten something important, only to have it resurface in the most unexpected way? I'd love to hear your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with clarity and discovery. Ever had one of those days where you feel like you've forgotten something really important? Well, let me take you to the story of Sam, a guy who had a particularly unforgettable day. Sam woke up to the blaring sound of his alarm clock, the kind that makes you question why you set it in the first place. He rolled out of bed, stretched, and glanced at the calendar. Today was his best friend's wedding, the one he'd been waiting for all year, the one he promised to be the life of. But as Sam rushed around his tiny apartment, a nagging feeling started tugging at his brain. He scrambled to get ready, muttering to himself about how he should have ironed his suit the night before. His pants were inside out, his shirt had a coffee stain, and he couldn't find his matching socks. He was a walking disaster zone. But as he looked at the clock, he noticed something odd. The time seemed to be ticking faster than usual. Panic set in. After a mad dash to the wedding venue, Sam burst through the doors, a bit out of breath and slightly disheveled. His friend Mark, looking dapper in his tuxedo, greeted him with a huge grin. "Sam, you made it," Mark said, clearly relieved. "Of course," Sam replied, his smile a little forced. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The ceremony went off without a hitch, and Sam managed to blend into the background during the speeches. He was even enjoying the reception, until he realized he had no idea where he'd put the gift he'd bought for Mark. He had wrapped it beautifully, and now it was nowhere to be found. Sam darted around the reception hall, checking under tables, behind curtains, and even in the restroom. He was like a man on a mission, except he wasn't entirely sure what he was looking for. People gave him curious glances as he muttered to himself, "Where could it be? It's got to be here somewhere." Just when he thought things couldn't get any worse, he spotted a woman who looked strikingly familiar. She was chatting away with some guests, and Sam couldn't shake the feeling that he knew her. As he approached, trying to recall her name, she turned and said, "Hi, Sam. Remember me?" Sam's face went as red as a tomato. Hi. I'm sorry. I'm terrible with names. Refresh my memory?" The woman chuckled. "It's me, Lisa, from the office. We met at the Christmas party last year." Sam slapped his forehead. "Of course. Lisa, how could I forget?" Lisa raised an eyebrow. "I've been waiting for you to remember. I was the one who was supposed to help you with the surprise for Mark." "The surprise?" Sam's eyes widened as he finally remembered. He had been planning a special surprise for Mark, a video montage of their best moments together. Lisa had helped him set it up, but he had completely forgotten about it. Panic mode activated. Sam rushed to the designated spot where Lisa had set up the projector. The guests were eagerly waiting, and Sam had to act fast. He fumbled with the remote, sweating bullets as he tried to get the video to play. The room was filled with awkward silence, and Sam could feel the sweat dripping down his back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the video started. The room was filled with laughter and applause as the montage played, showcasing funny moments, heartfelt messages, and embarrassing childhood photos. Mark's face lit up with joy, and Sam breathed a sigh of relief. The surprise was a hit. As the night went on, Sam was approached by various guests who congratulated him on the great surprise. He even had a chance to chat with Lisa, who had become quite the hero in his eyes. Later, as Sam was heading home, he couldn't help but laugh at the day's events. From forgetting his socks to nearly botching the surprise, it had been a roller coaster. But in the end, it all worked out. He had managed to pull off the surprise, and Mark had an unforgettable wedding night. As Sam walked to his car, he realized something important. It wasn't about the little mishaps or the forgotten names. It was about the memories, the laughter, and the people who made the day special. Sometimes, it's the little mix-ups that make life memorable. So, if you ever find yourself forgetting something important, just remember Sam's wedding day. Because even when things go awry, there's always a way to turn it around and make it unforgettable. And that's the story of how a forgotten name led to an unforgettable night. Have you ever had a day where everything seemed to go wrong, but somehow it all turned out all right? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of unexpected adventures. Troy always had a knack for finding trouble, but this latest escapade was truly one for the books. He'd just moved into a new apartment building, and on his very first day, he made a classic rookie mistake. He decided to test out the old elevator by himself. Little did he know, this wasn't just any elevator. This was the phantom lift, as the locals called it. It all started when Troy pressed the button to go up to his floor. The elevator creaked to life with a groan that seemed to come straight from a horror movie. The doors slid open with a slow, menacing glide, and Troy stepped inside. He hit the button for the 7th floor and prepared for a mundane ride. But as the elevator jolted upward, it didn't feel quite right. Halfway up, the lights flickered and then went out entirely. In the pitch-black elevator, Troy could barely see his own hand in front of his face. He fumbled around, trying to find the emergency button, when he heard it. A soft, eerie moan, like something, was trying to get out of the elevator shaft. "Great," Troy muttered. "Just what I need. A ghost with a serious case of claustrophobia." The elevator jolted again, and the lights flickered back on. Troy blinked, trying to get his bearings, when he noticed something strange in the corner of the elevator. There was a pair of glowing eyes staring right at him. Not a reflection. Actual, glowing eyes. "Seriously," Troy said aloud, looking around as if expecting someone to pop out from behind a corner. "Is this a Halloween prank or something?" Just then, the elevator lurched to a stop, and the doors slowly creaked open. Troy peered out into the dimly lit hallway. It looked deserted. With a sigh of relief, he stepped out, hoping to escape whatever was haunting the elevator. As he turned to walk away, he heard a giggle. A soft, childlike giggle that seemed to echo down the empty hall. Troy spun around, but there was no one there. He shook his head, chalking it up to nerves. He turned back to the elevator, ready to head back inside and take the stairs instead. But as he approached, the doors slammed shut with a sudden force. The elevator started moving again, and Troy's heart raced as he heard the sound of tiny footsteps inside. "What in the world is going on?" Troy asked, his voice trembling slightly. The elevator jolted to a stop again, and the doors opened to reveal a young, ghostly figure, about the size of a child, with translucent skin and a mischievous grin. The ghost floated in mid-air, her tiny feet dangling just above the ground. "Boo!" she squeaked, making Troy jump back with a yelp. "Ah!" Troy exclaimed, clutching his chest. "What is this? A ghost prank?" The little ghost giggled again and floated closer. "I'm not a prank. I'm just here to have some fun." Troy, still in shock, but now slightly amused, decided to play along. "Oh yeah? And what kind of fun are we talking about here?" The ghost twirled around in the elevator, making the lights flicker. "I've been stuck here for ages. I just wanted to find someone to play with." Troy raised an eyebrow. "Play with? Look, I'm not exactly into ghost games. How about we just stick to basic elevator rides?" The ghost pouted, her eyes growing even bigger. "But I've been so bored. I can't leave this elevator. It's my home." Troy sighed, realizing there was no way out of this. All right. What do you want to do?" The ghost's face lit up. "Can we play hide and seek?" "Hide and seek?" Troy chuckled. "You know, You're supposed to be hiding, not scaring people out of their minds. The ghost floated closer and whispered, "Just for a little while. Please?" Troy looked at the eager little ghost and couldn't help but smile. "All right, but you have to promise not to scare me too much." The ghost gave a ghostly cheer and floated off into the elevator, giggling as she hid behind the walls. Troy counted to 10, then turned around to find her. The elevator lights flickered on and off, making the game even more eerie. After a few rounds of hide and seek, Troy and the ghost started to enjoy each other's company. He even managed to get a few good laughs out of her, especially when he pretended to be scared of her ghostly pranks. Eventually, the elevator reached the 7th floor, and Troy stepped out with the ghost floating beside him. She gave him a sad wave. "I guess this is where we part ways." Troy looked back at the elevator, and then at the cheerful ghost. "Hey, it wasn't so bad. Maybe we can play again sometime." The ghost's eyes sparkled with delight. "Really? I'd like that." With one last cheerful wave, the ghost floated back into the elevator, which then shut its doors and descended once more. Troy shook his head and chuckled. "Well, that was the weirdest day I've had in a long time." As he walked down the hallway, he couldn't help but think about his new friend. The elevator ride might have been strange, but it ended up being a lot more fun than he'd ever expected. Before entering his apartment, he turned around and waved at the now empty elevator. "See you around, ghost." And with that, Troy stepped inside his apartment, wondering what other surprises this old building might have in store for him. One evening, Jeremy, an amateur ghost hunter with a flair for the dramatic, decided it was time to investigate the infamous empty chair mystery at the old Winslow mansion. For weeks, he'd been hearing tales of a chair that supposedly moved on its own, and he was determined to capture it on camera. Armed with his trusty camera, a flashlight, and a snack pack of peanut butter crackers, Jeremy set up his gear in the grand, dusty living room of the mansion. The old wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he walked to the center of the room, where the infamous chair stood. It was an ornate Victorian piece, with intricate carvings and velvet cushions that looked like they hadn't been sat on for a century. The chair, perfectly centered in the middle of the room, was said to move on its own, much to Jeremy's skepticism. "All right," he said to himself, adjusting the camera. "Let's see if this old story has any truth to it." He sat down in a dusty armchair nearby, hoping to get comfortable for what he anticipated would be a long, uneventful night. The mansion was eerily quiet, with only the occasional gust of wind rattling the old windows. Jeremy took a deep breath and decided to document the chair's supposed movements. He started with a little joke to lighten the mood. "All right, Mr. Chair, show me what you've got. I've seen better moves from my grandmother at the family dance-off." He watched the chair intently, the silence punctuated by the occasional scratch of a mouse somewhere in the walls. Hours seemed to pass with nothing happening. Jeremy's eyelids began to droop, and he decided it was time for a snack break. Just as he reached for his peanut butter crackers, he heard a faint creak from the chair. Jeremy's eyes shot open, and he immediately focused the camera on the chair. It was moving, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The chair inched forward by a few centimeters, then stopped. "Ha! Look at that!" Jeremy exclaimed, trying to contain his excitement. "You've got to be kidding me. This is it." He watched, riveted, as the chair creaked again, and then, quite unexpectedly, spun around in a full circle. Jeremy's jaw dropped. "Whoa! This chair's got moves. I hope I'm not going to end up with a case of haunted furniture syndrome." Jeremy's sense of adventure was now in full swing. He began narrating his observations with a dramatic flair. "As you can see, the chair is showing off its dance skills. Maybe it's auditioning for Dancing with the Ghosts." He chuckled at his own joke, only to notice that the chair had stopped spinning and was now facing him directly. Feeling a mix of trepidation and amusement, Jeremy decided to ask the chair directly. "All right, chair, what's your deal? Looking for a dance partner or just trying to redecorate?" Suddenly, the chair moved backward a bit, then forward again, as if nodding. "Oh, I see. You're picky about your dance partners. Well, let's see how you handle a little groove." Jeremy started to dance in his seat, his moves as awkward as they were enthusiastic. The chair responded by moving back and forth in sync with his dance. "This is incredible," Jeremy laughed. "The chair is totally into it." Minutes passed as Jeremy and the chair engaged in an impromptu dance-off. The camera recorded every moment, capturing Jeremy's ridiculous dance moves and the chair's oddly cooperative movements. "I guess the chair and I make quite the team," he joked, twirling around. Just then, the room's door creaked open, and Jeremy's friend, Mark, peeked in, his eyes wide with confusion. "What on earth are you doing?" Mark asked. Jeremy, caught mid-dance, was momentarily at a loss for words. Just having a little dance party with the chair. It's got some serious moves." Mark stared at the chair, which had now settled back into its original position. "I think you've officially lost it," he said, chuckling. "But hey, I'll give you credit. If anyone can make a haunted chair look like a party guest, it's you." Jeremy, still grinning, glanced at the camera. "Well, folks, it looks like the empty chair is less of a ghostly enigma and more of a dance partner. Who knew?" As the night wore on, the chair remained still, and Jeremy decided it was time to call it a night. He packed up his equipment, still amused by the evening's events. So, if anyone ever tells you that a haunted chair is nothing but a spooky story, just tell them it's actually got some pretty good moves. Jeremy and Mark left the mansion, their laughter echoing down the old, creaky halls. The empty chair had proved to be more entertaining than either had anticipated, and Jeremy was already planning his next ghost-hunting adventure. As they drove away, Jeremy turned to Mark. "I wonder what other haunted furniture might be out there. Maybe next time, we'll discover a ghostly grand piano with a taste for jazz." Mark chuckled. "Just make sure you're ready to dance." The story of Jeremy and the empty chair quickly became a favorite among their friends, a tale of unexpected companionship and dance-offs with the supernatural. And as for Jeremy, he was more than ready for his next adventure, eager to see what other surprises awaited in the world of haunted curiosities. And who knows, maybe that chair was just waiting for its next dance partner. If you ever find yourself in an old mansion and come across a lonely, dusty chair, you might want to try a little jig. You never know. Your dance moves might just make history. Have you ever had one of those nights where everything feels a bit off? Maybe it's the creaking of the house settling, or the eerie silence that seems to stretch on forever. For me, it started with a phone call. Well, more like a series of phone calls, all from the same mysterious number. It was late, the kind of late where even the crickets had called it a night. I was just about to settle into bed when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Glancing at the screen, I saw a number I didn't recognize. No name, just a string of digits that seemed to mock my curiosity. Curiosity got the better of me, as it often does at that time of night. I answered, expecting maybe a wrong number or a telemarketer who hadn't gotten the memo about appropriate calling hours. But as soon as I said hello, there was nothing but silence on the other end. No background noise, no heavy breathing, just dead air. "Hello?" I tried again, my voice echoing in the empty silence. Still nothing. Now, I'm not one to get spooked easily, but there's something inherently unsettling about a silent phone call in the dead of night. I almost hung up, chalking it up to a glitchy connection or someone playing a prank. But then it happened again, and again. Every night for a week, like clockwork, the same number would call, and each time, I'd answer to that eerie silence. It started to mess with my head. Was it someone trying to mess with me, or was there something more sinister at play? One night, Fueled by equal parts curiosity and frustration, I decided to stay on the line. Maybe whoever it was just needed a moment to gather their thoughts before speaking. So, I held the phone to my ear, listening intently to the silence as seconds turned into minutes. Then, just as I was about to give up and hang up, I heard it. A faint rustling, like someone shifting on the other end. My heart skipped a beat. "Hello?" I ventured cautiously. This time, there was a response, but it wasn't what I expected. Instead of words, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible giggle. Not a sinister laugh, mind you, but the kind of laugh that sends shivers down your spine because it's unexpected and out of place. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. The giggle faded into silence again. And just when I thought the call was going to end like all the others, a voice, low, almost whispering, said, "You'll find out soon enough." Then, click. The line went dead. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much that night, or the nights that followed for that matter. The mysterious phone calls continued, each time with that same eerie silence, followed by cryptic messages that left more questions than answers. I tried everything, blocking the number, changing my phone settings, even considering calling the police. But nothing seemed to stop the calls. It was as if whoever, or whatever, was on the other end had a direct line to my unsettled mind. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the calls abruptly stopped. No warning, no explanation, just silence finally, but the kind that brought its own sense of unease. Had I imagined it all? Was it just a bizarre prank that had run its course? To this day, I still don't have the answers. The number disappeared from my call log as mysteriously as it had appeared, leaving me with only memories of those silent, unsettling nights. And every now and then, when my phone buzzes late at night, I can't help but wonder, is it them calling again? So, next time your phone rings late at night and you see a number you don't recognize, ask yourself, do you dare to answer? Because you never know what might be waiting on the other end of that silent phone call. And there you have it, the unnerving tale of the silent phone calls that haunted my nights. Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that creep into our everyday lives when we least expect them.